Last year we did Tzuras Pesach and different things with Tzuras Pesach and lechis and wires, and this year we're doing mechitzas. So most of the thing I was going to be discussing is repairs on mechitzas, and different tools and ideas. We're only going to cover a small amount. My main takeaway that everybody should have is that if you do have a problem with your Eruv, you can always call me. You can always, to find out tools or technical ways to get things done. My phone on Shabbos, I keep it on pretty much till Lichbenchen. And my favorite story is with Rabbi Brafman. He calls me from Milwaukee, and we had a Tzuras Pesach that was close to 25 feet high, and the wire broke. A garbage truck came, lifted the container, and snapped the wire. So he didn't have a bucket truck. He had no way of putting it up. And the truth is, I didn't know of any idea of how he could get it up either. But as he's talking to me, I'm thinking, I said, do you have a bungee cord in your trunk? And he's like, well, that's personal information. What do you ask me that for? So I said, well, he goes, I happen to have a bungee cord in my trunk. I said, go get the bungee cord. So he says, good, what do I do now? So I said, tie the bungee cord to one side of the string. So he does that, and I said, pull it as tight as you can and tie it to the other side of the string. He says, yeah, now what? I said, just let go. And he let go, and the Eruv was up. Just popped, the wire popped up into the sky. So sometimes it's not a matter of finding up a heter, it's finding up a chap of how you can get the mitzias of getting the Eruv up again. Yeah, you wanted me to mention, by the way, also last year's sessions are all recorded. If anybody wants to see them, where can they find them? On the website, on the conference website, all of the recordings for last year, and I guess this year will also be available if anybody needs them. So the first thing I was going to discuss was Gediyim Bokim Tachtav. You have a chain link fence, and oftentimes they curl up at the bottom, and you'll have a section, a large section where the chain link fence is up. So one of the lessons that I learned, I used to go to Home Depot, and I used to buy this welded wire. And I would cut sections like this, depending on how high it was, and I would use hog rings to attach this to the fence. If those who do not know what hog rings are, I highly recommend them. They look like this. They're just a little piece of metal that looks like this. You can come and take a look afterwards. And you need a special pliers, which usually you can get for like $8. And then when you want to attach something to a fence, you just squeeze it, and you make sure you have the chain link and this together, and use these hog rings. The zip ties eventually will degrade. These won't degrade because they're made out of aluminum. So that was the way that I used to fix them. This actually is not very good because this I just removed from an Eruv. That's why I happen to have it. Weed whackers will break this. So I did this once like on the side of a cemetery, and the cemetery was very good with their groundskeeping. And I came back like a half a year later, and none of this was there. It just, their weed whackers ripped it all apart because it's a very thin gauge metal. So what I do use now is a fencing which you can get from Tractor Supply, which Rabbi Steinmetz introduced me to, which is a much higher gauge steel. I brought it in to show it to you, and then I was getting gas this morning, and I put it up on my rack, and then I left it there. It is somewhere. I hope I did not cause anybody tsaras with it. But the lesson learned is always make sure to put things back when you close the cabinet. And so the only thing with a higher gauge wire like that is you're not going to be able to use a standard cutter. You're going to have to get yourself a mini bolt cutter, like made by Knipex or some other mini bolt cutter to cut that. But that's what I recommend for using. And I'll cut sections. I was actually going to do it here, but the fencing that you use is a cattle fencing, and the holes are about 6 inch by 6 inch. So if you cut it in the middle, you have a piece of wire sticking out. I'll put that at the bottom, shove those pieces of wire into the ground. That holds it from flailing out. And then I'll use the little piece of fencing that's at the top to actually use that to attach to the fence, and then I'll put hog rings throughout. And I've done repairs with that. I did it in Linden, and I went back, how many years ago did I do the first repairs? I went back 2 years later or something. It was still working well. So I highly recommend it from Tractor Supply. They have very good cattle fencing, and that's what I generally will use. As well, if you have chain link fence that falls down, you just need to put up cattle fencing. That's the best fencing to use. Yes? Right, you do have to be careful. They have a lot of different cattle fencing. Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll actually maybe I'll take a little picture of it and I'll post a link of where to get it. You can get it from it doesn't have to be Tractor Supply, other places in the United States where they have farm supplies. There's a catalog called Ken Cove that also sells all of these fencing that you can use. One chiddush that I came up with last week in Linden, so I'm a little bit of a scavenger for garbage. So I was working in Linden and I was working next to a dumpster to do some fence repair where it was getting broken top of. And I found a bunch of these rebars. And then Moshe came to me and says, there's another place you need to fix. And I had run out of the fencing. I slammed these into the ground 2 feet, right at the bottom of the chain link. And I wove it through the chain link before I banged it in. And this actually did a very good job. I put 2 or 3 of these of this rebar. What? It's threaded, because I actually took it off of the big spools that they use for the telecom wire that they have on the back of the trucks. This was holding the spool together. And I don't know why, I just felt like scavenging it because I thought it was like a great piece of junk. Now I'm gonna start keeping rebar on my truck because to fix fence bottoms, because this will certainly last through the weed whackers, and it was very easy for me to do. We just took a hammer and banged it into the ground. What? Not near your utilities, right. Well, I don't go that far in. I only go maybe this 2 feet. Yeah. The cattle fence is a much higher grade gauge wire, so it doesn't get ripped by weed whacker. The downside is you need a much better cutter to cut it. Yeah, this stuff you can cut with anything. In fact, the weed whacker wire rips it. I mean, you see, I had installed this. I don't even know. Just it ripped itself apart. I just ripped a piece off. It's not like the cattle fencing at all. It's the best that Home Depot has, but it's Home Depot. The next thing for Gideon Bogen Tachta, which is one of the better, which is the way, if you ask the fencing person how to do it, is this bottom wire. This wire, which is incredibly thick, if you look at chain link fencing carefully, if it's quality fencing, they'll either put a bottom rail or they'll put a bottom wire. And the way it works is you have these 2 brace bands. Now you can get all of this at a fencing supply store. I went to the fencing supply store. He gave this to me for free because I just told him I needed a small piece. So he gave it to me. And you'll put this on one of the fence posts. You need to get the right size. You need to know your fencing. I have out there on the display there's 2.5 inch, there's 2 inch, 1 5/8, and 1 3/8. Those are the types of fence poles you can have. And there'll be different brace bands which are different sizes. If you got the wrong one, it won't be the worst deal, but you put these on, you put the bolt that comes with it through, and then this gets attached onto the bolt. Now the question is, how are you going to bend this? So this one you can how do you twist this? So you probably could leave it like this, especially if it was Erev Shabbos, and you would be fine. You'll pull this along. You can go 20, 30 feet if your fence is curled up, and then you bring the fence down and use the hog rings to attach to this. That's the way normal fencing is done. And that's the best thing. This will last, and that's the way a real fencing person would do it. If you want to really know how to do it, you want to do a professional job, you can get these on Amazon. They have a lot of different uses and different fencing things, but there's these and these. I'll leave them up here. You can look at them. And they have different size holes depending on the different gauge of the wire. And put it in like this, and then you'll be able to spin this much more easily. It's a little hard because I'm holding it by hand, but this will enable you to spin it around. I don't think I can do it while I'm holding it by hand. And the other tool to do the same thing is this guy. It's the same type of thing. You put it on here, and it grabs the thing, and it'll spin it around as well. Yeah, you can put a pipe and do it, yeah. But it's hard sometimes. You're going to be pretty close to the ground, so you're going to have a hard time spinning it, so these smaller tools are a little bit better. So this with hog rings and rebar, I think are the best ways to fix the fencing that's at the bottom. The green ones? The advantage is cheaper. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, you could use it. You could use it if you want to use a fence stake. I mean, and there's some places that I do that. I put an actual fence post in, but it's a little bit overkill. The other thing is if you're doing a lot of hog rings, if it's something you do all the time, this is a hog ring tool that has all the hog rings stacked in it, and these hog rings are a much higher gauge, and then it feeds them in automatically. I hate the tool, and I hardly ever use it, but it does exist if you're doing. Now, the next thing with chain link fences is let me see what I was going to do next. Oh, lots of times you'll have it that the fabric of the chain link is coming off of the posts. So a plow came, plowed snow against the fence, and it ripped all the fencing off of the posts. But now you come back, the fabric is all there, the posts are all there, but they're just detached one from the other. So generally what you would use is fence ties, which are very inexpensive and are good to carry. Let's see where I have them here. The mistake not to make those, to get aluminum and not steel. These are aluminum. I recently just bought a whole bunch, and they were steel, and they're like impossible to bend. The aluminum ones, you can bend them like this, and you put it on the chain link fabric on one side. You bring this around, and you attach it on the other side. That's the standard way fencing is done. If you get the steel ones, they're much, much harder to bend, much harder to work with. And so I recommend the aluminum ones. They have all different lengths, depending on how big your fence posts are. So you can get these are 9-inch, you can get the smaller ones. This is for the T-posts, and this is what you would attach it with. The problem that I sometimes have is that sometimes the fabric is so far removed from the fencing. So this was also in Linden, where there was a good 100 feet of fencing. All the fabric had come off. It was kind of just dangling there. And I couldn't even, if I had somebody helping me and they pushed it back to the post, I couldn't even get it back to the posts. So then I came up with this idea. It took me 2 or 3 visits to the place to realize if I use these hose clamps. So I used the big one and I put it onto around the post through the fencing. I used the impact driver. That pulled the fencing really, really close. And then I took a smaller one, and you can really use these as fence ties. They're expensive fence ties, but they're very good. They'll hold the fencing on really well. So in Passaic, we have a soccer field, and right behind the goal is a chain link fence. That chain link fence keeps getting hit by balls. So I knew that these were not going to hold up, because as the balls were hitting the fence, they keep ripping off the fence ties. So for those, I use these. Now these I got from our sponsor, who I really have to be thankful. These are half the price of what they have in Home Depot, and they are far better than what Home Depot sells. And especially when you're doing something like that where you're trying to hold it or trying to pull things with it. Right, the other ones will strip out and they'll break, or this little screw thingamabob just flies out. And I have Home Depot ones here, and the difference in thickness between the Home Depot and his is, I don't know if you can see it, but his are much thicker, these are much thinner, and the quality is no comparison, and his price is, I think, half the price of Home Depot. They have ones that get it, yeah, you can get very, very long ones where you cut off. That's what you use to fix fences. So this is lately what I've started to use. It's a little bit overkill, and it's a little bit expensive, but it does a much better job. And then some people, what I've noticed from my employees, some people do not have the coordination to do these, so then use these. These can be hard. Okay, that's the next thing, which is a little more interesting, is sometimes you have a mechitza on the side of a highway. You have a retaining wall, and it's not 10 tefachim tall. So how do you raise the height of the wall to get it to be 10 tefachim tall? So this was a chiddush that I came up with. I had my fencing store take the 6x6 plate and weld on an 8-inch piece of pipe, this 2-inch piece of pipe. And then you put this on, you put a screw in, and you run a railing across. And that is going to be lavud because it'll end up being less than 9 inches from the top rail. If you're on the Henry Hudson Parkway near 190 something, you'll see all along the side of the highway that the height of the sidewall wall has railings. And then I made pirzas of less than 10 amos so that just drove the price down. I didn't need as much material. because we went for almost like a quarter of a mile. And they used to have all these Tzuras Pesachs. And the problem was that the Baidik had to drive on the Henry Hudson. You can't pull over to the side of the road, and you have to go 55. So he was going 55, and he was missing, the strings were down, and it was not checkable. And it wasn't like he could, he'll pull over, and he'll go walk it. He'd have to pull over a mile away, then walk back, and walk through Central Park. And then when you walk right behind the wall, that's where all the homeless people live. It wasn't so geschmack. So we put railing. It was a little expensive, but I think it was, in the long run, going to be cheaper for them than having to do repairs on the side of the Henry Hudson and having to be Baidik on the side of the Henry Hudson. So therefore, we put up these, and then we used a 1 5/8 railing on the top. And the only thing I would caution you is that if you do try to do this on the side of the Garden State, you might get arrested. Just telling you that. Now, this I've never done, but this I designed for if the wall was really short. Because if the wall was much shorter, this does the same thing, the same principle. I've never had a customer who needed it, though. I thought it was such a great idea that I had these manufactured, but they're sitting in my garage. This is a brace band, and you could put it here in the middle, and you see it has this piece here. So you could run one railing here, another railing here, and then you would add a good, how many inches is that? Like a good 20 inches to the top of your thing, and that could also be very helpful. What? On the bottom? Of the bottom of, like the guardrails? Okay, so he's asking if you have a guardrail on the side of the road and the bottom is Gideon Bokim Taftav. I've never done it. I've never dealt with it. Right. So that was the fencing. That was that thing with the hog rings. What? Okay, so he's discussing putting one string on the bottom of a fence to make it loved. Unless your string is something like this, it probably won't be there when you come back because it's just going to fall. It's going to droop. So that's why I would recommend putting the welded wire because the welded wire won't droop and won't fall over time. There's one exception to that. That was the other thing I wanted to discuss. Sometimes you have an aluminum fence. Aluminum fence, when it's Gideon Bokim Tachtov, so aluminum fences, they'll have a rail at the bottom, an aluminum rail at the top, and these nice things in the middle. And sometimes it'll be in a fancy place. Usually, if they put up a nice fence like that, they didn't just put up chain link, they put up a nice aluminum fence. You don't just want to put welded wire at the bottom and tie it on because it looks really ugly and it doesn't match the fence. So what I came up with for that, I didn't bring the stuff in, but let's say the bottom of the post, let's say it was 12 inches from the ground. So somewhere in the middle, I would drill a hole through, and I would drill a hole through each post, and then run a 3/32 steel cable through, thread it through all of them. I would use the same crimps that we use on the metal wire. There's bigger crimps that can work for 3/32 wire. I would crimp one of those at the end that stops it from coming back through the hole, and put a turnbuckle in the wire and tighten it. We did this in Elizabeth. And what? We did it in San Antonio. How do you know that? Shoot, I don't have any secrets. We did it in San Antonio. I was very proud of myself. San Antonio was the first place that I did it. And running that wire there, the good thing then is that the bodeg comes and he sees that the wire is drooping, which is what I was worried about when you just put a wire. You just turn the turnbuckle and tighten it. It's never going to stretch that much that the turnbuckle won't be able to. And then that way, if it does start drooping, he can tighten it up. But it shouldn't because it's steel. So that's the way I do it with aluminum fencing. And okay, that's that. Another thing Rabbi Steinmetz just gave me on the way in here, which I'm excited about, is we'll see if there's a downside to this, but let me just open this up. When you're running a wire across the street, this I'm familiar with. Yeah. How do you open this? Now, this has several sections that come with it. This is fiberglass, which is nice. This is actually meant for this. What? This is good so you don't get zapped, but what it is, when you're walking a wire across the street, so the way I would walk a wire across the street, and this has nothing to do with mechitzas, but this is a great idea, and we haven't done it yet, so this will be exciting to see how it works. You're attaching the wire on one side, and now you're going to walk across the street to the other side. But sometimes trucks will come in the middle or cars will come in the middle. I'm generally working alone, so I don't have somebody to stop all the traffic, and this is a great idea. Maybe I'll try using this. Is that the wire is up there, you'll bring it over here, and this way you can walk across the street. Right, right. And then you could walk across the street. It's an idea. This is a new one. When did you think of this? We've never done this before. No, and I've never done it before. Chaim, you've done this? Where's Chaim? All right. Well, if it does fail, please make a WhatsApp video for the rest of us. That's all I can say. This is another. Yeah, usually I don't need this because I'm coming from something very high, and I hold the thing like this. Most cars will go underneath. But it's a nice idea. You see? Yeah. So this is really more for like bucket truck people who are running wires over roads. But if you're running, you attach the wire on the top of your lechi 18 feet up. So generally the way I do is I walk across this, I look to make sure there's no cars coming for a long time, and then I position my truck on the other side of the street and get it ready. Then I go back, get the spool, walk across, get into the bucket, and quickly go up before any cars come. But even if a car comes, I'm okay, because if I'm holding this at 6 feet and it's going up to 18 feet, a car can run underneath. The trouble is when a bus comes or a truck comes and it grabs your spool, and then if you don't let go of the spool really quickly, the wire, as it runs across your skin, cauterizes as it's cutting, so you don't bleed. But you get a huge cut going really deep. I don't know this from experience, but somebody who once tried to help me, I saw it happen to him. It was, yeah.
Car took it at 65 miles an hour and took out the whole 1,000 feet of road.
Right. And then it's usually a BMW or something like that. Okay. Yeah.
I would strongly suggest, so we had a ramp in Staten Island, we were replacing the string, and we didn't close the ramp. Should have. A motorcycle went over the string and got caught. So you really should try to close down your ramp.
Right. I don't recommend running it across the ground and then picking it up. I've had some of my worst experiences doing that. I recommend keeping it up in the air. Right. You only need to stop one car. That'll stop the rest of the cars. Right. Yeah, that's true. Does anybody also let me throw this out there. Does anybody have any questions how to get a specific thing done that I could answer them? Yes. So, using a drone to take the wire across the street? You could, but probably overkill. I don't have a drone, so I couldn't do that. In theory, it could work. Rabbi Steinmetz is also showing, this is another new thing that we found. These are, instead of standoff pieces, for those who use 1-inch conduit to install using this will eliminate the need for the standoff pieces. I did not choose to bring in my standoff pieces to show them, but anybody who does install lechis and wants to know how to secure them at the top, I have a lot of stuff in my truck for that, and you can come over to me afterwards. But these are new. No, these are actually just made for holding conduit away from the wall. What? This? You have those. These are from you. But these are from you. I think so. I do think, I do want to make another plug, by the way. I do want to make a plug for the screws and stuff that he sells. One of the challenges that I have had is often trying to find products. And so I was not always able to find a screw that was 8 inches long, but that was small enough to go through my, whatever it is that you need. And he will work with you. And even though he's not going to make money off of it. See, a lot of places, if you call and you say, like, I need 100 screws that are going to do this, they're not interested. They're not interested in selling you 1,000 screws. They want to know if you're buying 100,000 screws. He will help you, even if you're buying 100 screws, and that's because he's L'Shem Shemayim, and he will very much try to assist you to find the product that you need to get what you're getting done. So for example, the gray U-guard that a lot of people like to use, it has big holes on the side. And for those who like to use those big holes, they needed a certain fastener. They like to use a certain drill and a certain this. They call him up and they say, this is what I like, and this is how I want it done. And he gets a few. Do you like Phillips? Do you like the T25, whatever type of bit you like, or whatever it is that you want? He'll work with you to make sure you get what you want. And even if it's not worth it for him, he'll get you the product. So I highly recommend calling him. And I also want to thank him for all the assistance that he's given us. I don't think that the business we give you makes it worth it, but I think that the schluss you have makes it worth it. Does anybody else have any other questions on how to get specific things done? If not, then what do I have to talk about? How much more do I have to go? Okay.
Do you, Rabbi Shotkin, do you rely on the string lechi technique? If you have a piercing between two lengths of fencing. String.
I don't, because it's cheap and I like my work to look professional, but there are those who do that. Like, that's for somebody who doesn't have my tools. Like, you know what I'm saying? So if somebody has my tools, they should be putting up 2 poles and a nice string and not relying on that, this one becomes that. Okay, so while we're at this, if you work alone, this is incredibly hard to squeeze and to put the bolt through and then to get the nut on. So there happens to be a tool that's for that. This will hold this bolt in place, squeeze it, and leave this open for you to get the bolt on. So for a guy like me who works alone, generally, this has, I'm embarrassed to say there have been times that it took me a half an hour to get the nut onto the bolt in one of these. And this made it happen very quickly. So it's a not very well-known tool, but that's one thing that helped me. Another, what? I don't even know what it's called. I don't think it has a name, but you can come and take a look at it. And most fencing stores don't even, if you go into a fencing store and ask them for it, they won't know what you're talking about because they work with crews. So they have one guy squeeze it, and the other guy puts on the nut and the bolt. Like, this is a rare thing. Another tool that's helpful is, the truth is, when you want to use this and you want to pull it tense, and get it very nice and tight, that's what this is for. This is a clamp that clamps onto the wire. You could use this for your Eruv wire too if you ever needed it. When I first bought this and was excited about it, I would use it when I would bring a wire over and I wanted just to hold the wire while I was working on something else. I would put it in this clamp and just have it hang there, and it holds the wire without damaging it. This, if you put this in and then you attach your come-along to this, it pulls it really tight, and then you put on your hog rings while it's nice and tight. So this is another useful little thing if you're using this to pull it tight. But it probably has some other applications for some things that I haven't thought of. The next thing with chain link is, if you're working with chain link, let's say a piece of chain link fell off the post, and you put a new post, you want to re-pull the chain link back to the fence. So this grabs the little bars, the tension bars that go through the chain link at the end. This clips onto that, it grabs your pole, and it pulls your chain link tight. And then you can put on all of your brace bands while this is holding it tight. These are little tools that are out there. They're not expensive, but they're seldom used, but the few times that you do use them, they save the day. I think that's about it. So if anybody else has any other questions, yes? So, okay, my personal favorite was an interesting, there was an Eruv that the Eruv checker went blind, but he still wanted to check the Eruv. And he had somebody who would drive him, but the question was, he couldn't see any of the wires. So I did a little research as to how I could best flag the tape so that he could still check, because we want him to maintain his dignity. He should be able to check the Eruv. So, what? Yeah. So I think it was close to a $500 bill just for installing flagging tape on all of their wires. I was so proud of that Eruv that they didn't fire the checker, but they spent the money to make sure that he could keep his job and maintain his dignity. I was very, very impressed with them. Yeah, it was the amount of work I did. I normally would have done that little, yeah, so little time. I could tie the little high vis stuff, but that wouldn't last. It would. So, what I have with the reflective tape. So the way I used to do it is you just take a piece of tape. I wish I had a roll of tape here, but here, let's say it's like this. Let's say this is your tape. I would take the tape, a nice thick piece of tape like this. I buy tape that's this thick, and I would fold it over the wire like this, and it would sit there, and then the wind would blow it, and it would keep spinning. And as it spun, it would get a nice crack right here, and it would fall off after, about a month or 2 months. And I needed this thing to last because they wanted this checker to stand for the next few years. So what I realized is that if your tape is like this, if you put it, instead of the classic way to put it, I think the intuitive way to do it is to put it like this. The unintuitive way is to put your tape like this, and to fold it once over like this, and then again over like this. Now it's like 2 or 3 times thick over the wire. It's a much longer distance, and the wind doesn't blow it to flap because it's very narrow. So it has a nice thickness. And then the additional thing I did for this particular Eruv was in Home Depot they sell, if you're caulking and there's a space, and you don't want to fill the whole space with caulking and silicone, so they have this styrofoam that you shove in there. It's a little round styrofoam thing. Yeah, yep, exactly. I took that, sliced it halfway through, and put it onto the wire, and then rolled my tape around it, and it made a nice thick, for the eye, they'd be able to see, but it was round, so it didn't get blown as much in the wind. And I'm finding those last and stay on for a long time, and the checkers find it much easier to see than the other things that fell off. So that's what I have to say about flagging tape.
Wires that have bungee cord abilities, meaning that if it falls down, it snaps up back again. That is possible.
So yeah, so in bungalow colonies or other places, if you're using a nylon wire, the nylon wire is stretchy. You didn't need the bungee cord. You could just pull the 2 pieces together and tie it and just let go. That's what you do in a bungalow colony. So in a bungalow colony, they usually use this 50-pound, 50-test nylon fishing line. And when you go to the bungalow colony and you find the 2 pieces, just pull them, tie it, send it back up. The reason why I generally, that's what you would do if you're in a bungalow colony. But generally, the problem with that is usually when the wire breaks, there's damage to the wire, and you want to put a new one up just so that, if you're dealing with citywide area and you want it to be quality, you don't want to pull a Dave August where there's 17 knots in the wire and it's all, it keeps breaking every week and they can't figure out why.
You think it's not strong enough, though, constantly. Those bungee wires are not going to last.
They're nylon. The nylon's good for bungalow colony type of thing. It's good. I mean, some citywide area even use nylon wires. I know that a lot of people call me and ask me what's the best Eruv wire. And I say the best Eruv wire is one that doesn't get hit by things, because all wire stays up until it's hit by something, and then it comes down. It is true. Nylon wire degrades. If you have the wrong wire, if you really use the wrong wire, it degrades in the sun, and eventually they crack on their own and they fall down. But nylon. But you can get UV protected nylon. I don't know. I'm not a big salesman of any particular wire. I'm not a big fan of any particular wire.
We're a city that's very concerned about a wire falling down.
Yeah.
What do you tell them? I want to give them a sense that it's something secure, and even if it does fall down, it won't leak everything.
Oh, you're from Milwaukee, I guess. So what he's talking about, I'll tell you what he's talking about so that everybody knows. In Milwaukee, I put up a wire going across Lincoln Memorial Drive, from the top of one light pole to another light pole. How long ago did this happen? 2 months ago? This is fresh off the press. The wire came down, and a bicyclist was riding on an e-bike, and he got snagged by the wire. And it didn't cut him, but made him a nice scratch here and a nice scratch there. And he's asking, is there a wire that we can put up that won't run into those problems? YU is under litigation right now. It was also my wire. The wire came down, and a lady tripped on it. And so I used to think, well, my name is not on the wire. They won't be able to figure out it was me. But the truth is, the lawyer was smart, knew it was an Eruv wire, and sued the Washington Heights Eruv. So Washington Heights said, that's not our Eruv, that's the YU Eruv. It has nothing to do with us. They said, oh, thank you. Now we know whose Eruv it is. And they went to YU, and they sued YU. So YU is in litigation right now for this lady who tripped. And I only pray that I'm not on that. At the L'chorah, they could sue me as well, because I was the installer. But I don't think a nylon wire is going to be different than a steel wire for that.
The potential solution, I believe in Eretz Israel, they're developing sensors for string. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that has been, there's interest in America, but it could be that as Eretz Israel gets better with it, that maybe we could use that to help over here. Putting a sensor on the wire that if something changes that's drastic, like you'll get a notification and they'll deal with it right away. Okay, but in a place where, a city that you're going to have to do it.
They actually have the technology. They already have it. They have, for mobile homes, people have mobile homes, they put these sensors in to see if it goes off level. The problem is the sensors only work with Bluetooth, so it'll only notify you if you're within 100 feet of the sensor. If you want the sensor to notify you when you're at yeshiva, you're going to have cell phone built into that sensor. So if you need 1,000 of those sensors or 500 in your Eruv, you need 500 cell phone subscriptions. That's going to be expensive. You're going to have 500 SIM cards. It's going to be expensive. But it still could come down and a person get hurt before you get there. You know, it doesn't solve all the problems. But yeah, if it's possible. Right. We put a sensor on. Right.
Have a sensor. We're not just letting him wake up at the end of the week saying, oh.
I hear. Yeah.
Last year's conference sponsor was kind of interested in stone ring, so maybe I could connect you with
Using let's say, stainless steel wire, steel cable, how tight do you pull that wire?
I pull it really tight. Well, the real answer is it depends who I'm working for and how machmir they are. So people who are really machmir, that they like their wires really straight, they don't want to sag at all, so then I pull it really tight. People, assuming that I'm not going to pull the, so for example, on that East Lincoln Drive, I was attaching to the top of a pendant, which is on the top of a light fixture. If I pulled too hard, that thing was just screwed onto the top of the post. I had a limit to how hard I could pull. But I sag it more when people, if they have all their wires in their Eruv sagging, or they're using telephone lines which sag. So I know they're not to the sag. So the less tight you pull, the less likely it is to come down.
Right, that's all it does. So from a practical standpoint, not so much about the lot.
Mhm.
From a practical standpoint, is the advantage in not having it pull so tight?
It will last longer. The downside to not pulling it tight is that it sways, it blows in the wind and our wires blow much quicker than the telephone wires, which are a nice thick cable. Right.
So there's a
But if you pull it pretty tight, it's not gonna go three tvachim. So, yeah.
doing the maximum I can, as long as it's once it's already not moving a lot.
Yeah. I wouldn't pull it any tighter than that. Any other questions of anything? Of how to build? Okay. No. Yes. So, if you're tying knots, there's one way to do it, and I don't know if I can explain it, just with words in my hands. But basically, you'll pull the wire as tight as you can. Then you'll hold it at the night bolt, right? You'll hold it there so it doesn't come back. Then with the second hand, you thread around the knot and tie the knot while it's still tight. So you see what you're getting? Let's say you have an eye bolt. So you'll pull the wire through, and you pull it really as tight as you want it, right? But then with this hand, hold the wire tight. Then with this hand, you take and you tie the knot so that it doesn't become loose. That's the way I do it with knots. Usually, though, I use ferrules and crimps. So it feeds through the sleeve, it goes through here and comes back through. So I can keep pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling until it's really tight. And then I just let go, and I only need my crimping tool with one hand to crimp it. Okay? That's all. I had an idea. My son said he can mount a GoPro on my hard hat. Would people be interested in me making how-to videos and posting them on various scenarios and other things? Okay. So I will. The other thing is maybe I could also get some nice Angry Goyim videos too, which we can post them with. But if people want that, I'll start doing it. The question is going to be where we can post all the videos. If I send them out on WhatsApp, I mean, I could do that too, but the problem is that in a year from now, if somebody wants a video on how to do it, we're not going to be able to find it. So we're going to have to post the videos on a website. The one thing I would ask is I would need an editor. If anybody would know a kid or somebody who could do the editing of the videos, just so that, like, if I'm spending 5 minutes digging and, we want to just do that fast forward on the video, if somebody could get me a video editor, that would help, and we could get that done.